Hello, welcome to Pecan Corner. I'm Tina, and today I'm making turkey and homemade egg noodles using my own canned turkey. Well, I nearly forgot to film this, so I'm a little behind. So I've got in my bowl, I've got 2 cups of flour, 2 teaspoons of salt, and 2 tablespoons of lard, and I've mixed those together, cut in my lard, and now I'm adding my eggs. I have to make this ahead of time because it is. Where's my fork? Let me get me a fork. I have to make this ahead of time because these need to dry out a little bit before I cook them, and so they need to lay out for a few hours before I put them in the broth. Now, you can add, I use one to 2 eggs per cup of flour. It depends on the size of your eggs, and it depends on the moisture content of your flour. You know, if it's more humid outside and your flour has absorbed more moisture, you may not need as much. You want a real dry dough, but you still might have to add a couple of tablespoons of water. This was my great-grandmother's recipe, and she used to make a batch of these just for herself. She'd use 1 cup of flour, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon of salt, and a tablespoon of shortening. You can use any kind of oil that you want to. You can use shortening or lard or bacon fat. Chicken fat, if you had chicken fat, you could use that. Or even oil, if you like coconut oil or olive oil, you could use an oil. Just fine. You just need something in there. These are going to be nice and yellow colored because I'm using the eggs that my brother gave me. They raise some hens out the house, and so I'm having to add a little bit more water here. The one egg per cup of flour is plenty for the holding together part once you get the noodles made. But you might need a little bit more water just to make the dough right. So now I'm going to use my pasta machine to roll these out with, but we always did it by hand. But I just don't have the strength to get them as nice and thin as the pasta machine does, and we like ours thinner. So I'm going to use that. But a rolling pin is just fine. You just whatever you prefer. There we go. This is kind of a messy thing. Kind of throws dough everywhere. You want a real dry dough. It's not at all sticky anywhere, and it'll just almost clean my bowl. It'll take everything off of the sides of the bowl, and I'm going to let it sit for a minute and let it hydrate the flour real good before I start fiddling with it. Get a little flour on my board here. I cleaned my board real good before I started, wiped the whole thing down, ran over it with a little bleach on a cloth, and let that dry good and air good. So I've got a nice clean board. If you're going to use if you've got a wood board that you can use just for baking, you don't ever need to wash it. You scrape it off and keep it clean that way, and keep it dry. Just like your rolling pins, you don't ever wash your rolling pins. Okay, that feels real soft and good now. So I'm going to cover this with a plastic or a towel, and then I'll come back when I'm going to roll it out in just a minute. Okay, now I'm back. Now I've got my, oops, put it on this side. Got my machine set up here. I'm going to start it at its there we go. Started at its most open. There we go. The widest point. I'm going to flour it a little bit. And I'm just going to run a little at a time through there. You need to kind of condition the dough a little bit, so running it through this 2 or 3 times is what helps do that. See how it's kind of got a lumpy look to it? As we run it through this 2 or 3 times, that'll help take that away, and it'll become very smooth and pliable. Put some more flour on it. Okay, now it's starting to look smooth now. Now if you like thicker noodles, you can leave them at that thickness, but that's a little bit too thick for me. So I'm going to put some more flour on them. It's alright, you're not going to get too much flour on them. So I'm going to move my dial a little bit there, and I'm going to roll them out a little bit thinner. There we go. There we go. That's nice. And these need to be thicker than your average, like linguine type pasta would be, or fettuccine. You want them a little bit thicker than that. All right. You're going to we want flour on them, because your flour on them like this is what helps thicken them once you put them in. Now then, set this back. This is one of my favorite recipes and one of my favorite memories of eating at home. And when I told Paul the other night, I said, okay, it's going to be cold. Are there any cold weather dishes that we haven't had yet? I'm going to set these aside and do them all at once when I change my dial here. This pasta machine belonged to my mother-in-law, belonged to Paul's mother, and I had never had one, and it's been a huge help. We really enjoy having it. And we've made a lot of fresh pasta with it. Paul and Cademan made ravioli one time before he got sick. They used this to roll it out with. Okay. You don't leave these out long enough to dry. You don't want them to get completely fully dry like macaroni would be or spaghetti would be. That's not the kind of dryness you want. This is not a pasta that you can dehydrate and store. And it's also not a pasta that you can make now and, you know, put in the freezer or cook up later. It doesn't do well with that. It needs to be made fresh each day, and I mean each time you're going to have it, and it needs to all be cooked within about 8 hours of when you make it. That's about dry enough usually. Oops. You can also add herbs to this if you like herbs. In the past I've added, you know, a little thyme or a little rosemary, anything that you like with your chicken. we're gonna make it a little thinner. Got some more flour here. Okay. Now, there we go. Let it all just lay it out there. And I'm going to cut it when I finish this. Okay, there we go. Now then, I'm just going to use my knife. You can use a pizza cutter. I've done that in the past. Get all this stuff out of the way. I like having this big island. It's nice to lay them out on. Used to lay them out on the kitchen table, and then just lay you just lay a clean dishcloth over them to protect them from dust until they are done.
My mother used to put a broom between two chair backs and hang over the broom.
Oh, okay. Well, that's another good idea too.
A really good thing is those kind of home dryer things that are racks, you know,
yes.
stand those, you can put tons of them on.
Yes. I actually have one of those. I didn't think about that, and in fact, that's what I bought it for. Was after you told me about Thelma doing that, and but I didn't get it out today, so today I'm just going to leave them out like this. They're about 1/2 inch wide. See, they're pretty wide. I like them. We like them wide. So I'm going to lay them like that. They stretch a little bit more when you're, and when I go to put them in, I won't leave them this long. They need to be cut into smaller lengths. You don't want them bite size, but they'll stretch way out, and we don't need them. We don't need them that long. So before I go to put them in, after I get them all laid out here, I'll cut them into different size pieces. There we go. I've never tried making like macaroni or any any kind of a pasta that you could actually dry. You couldn't use eggs in it, so unless you just use the whites. So I don't know how that would be done. Plus, I think you have to have a different kind of wheat that's not just plain old flour. There we go. Okay, I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, now got them all cut, and so I'm gonna cut some of them in half here, and some of the longest ones even in thirds. There we go. There we go. Cut these pieces off right there. There we go. These 3 long ones there. My grandmother, my great-grandmother that used to make these, her name was Pattie Bond. Bond was her middle name. And so my granddad used to tease her. Her son-in-law used to tease her and call her Pattie Bonannie. So every time I see Bonannie, I always think about her. All right, now then, I'm going to separate these out, and I'm going to lay them out. Leave them just laying here. I don't need the kitchen for anything until I get ready to do the rest of it. I've got some clean dish towels here that I only use for food. Where's the other one? There it is. We only use these for this kind of thing, and I just keep them separate from the regular cup towels and hand drying towels. And I use them for, yeah, there we go. I'll use this other one here. There we go. All right, and we will see you all after a while. Okay, now I've let the noodles dry for about 5 hours, and they're pretty stiff now. You can see they're kind of. I picked them up and brought them over here. They'll break apart instead of stretching like they did when I first laid them out there. Remember, I could pull them and they'd stretch, but now I pull them and they break. So that's about where we want to be. I've got, I had some leftover thighs that I had roasted the other night. So I took them off the bone and put the meat in there, and I've got some, I've got a quart and a half of broth already in there with them. And this is some of my canned turkey. I've been canning a turkey or two every year for a couple of years now, and we use the canned turkey all through the year. You know, when they're on sale for 29 cents a pound or something ridiculous like that. And I like it. I'm not a big fan of chicken so much as I am of turkey. I like the turkey a lot better. I'm gonna, most of it'll break apart, but these big large pieces I'm gonna cut into bite-sized pieces. We kind of like to make it easier to eat. Okay, now then, I'm not going to put the rest of this in there until after it's done either, because I don't want it to fall apart. I want it to stay into chunks, so I'm just going to cut this and then I'm going to set this aside and wait on that. I'm going to bring my liquid here to a boil. I'm probably going to add another 2 or 3 cups of liquid. I can just add water. That broth is really concentrated in the, okay. All right, now then, I'm going to bring this to a boil and then I'll put my noodles in. Okay, now my water is boiling, or my broth rather. So now I'm going to start putting my noodles in. And notice I'm just leaving the, I don't think you can see. Let me see if I can get over here where you see better. Okay, I've left the loose flour on the noodles because that's what will thicken the broth. And I drop them in there just a few at a time, so I don't want them to stick all together. And then I'll give it a stir. And you know, when I've cooked these, I've never timed how long it takes them to cook. So I guess I'll be doing that today and letting you guys know how long I cook them. Kind of hard to write the recipe down when you don't know how long it takes. There we go. These are going to be good. We haven't had this for all winter because we were doing keto, and so now we're being naughty and eating some things that are not keto friendly. Okay. All right, now I'm going to bring this back to a simmer, and I'm going to let them just do a gentle simmer. I'm going to put a lid on them, and just let them do a gentle simmer for at least half an hour. It may take a little bit longer than that. I'll be back. Alrighty, it's been cooking for about 45 minutes. I did have to add a little bit more flour to thicken it up, the broth up just slightly, but now it's looking really good. The noodles are tender. I've tasted of them, and they're nice and tender. Of course, it'll be better. The leftovers will be better tomorrow. That's how that always is. But now I'm going to add in the rest of the turkey that I had cut up. And heat that through. And it's time to dish it up into our bowls. By the way, I don't put any pepper into the broth when I'm making anything with chicken because it'll get too hot if you cook it in a soupy substance, if you cook black pepper in there. So while there's pepper in the noodles, I didn't add any extra salt or pepper to the broth. My canned broth already had some salt in it, so that's all good. All right, let me get my dishes. There we have it. I hope it looks as good to you as it does to me. This is Big Grandmother's homemade chicken and egg noodles. All right, thanks a bunch. Appreciate y'all watching. See you again soon.